Hi, this is Angelina Asante with another installment of Southwest Florida Online News. To celebrate Veterans Day and all that our American military does for us, we have local author and historian D.L. Havlin. This is an exciting podcast for me because I've learned so much about two characters in his new book, or his book, I guess we're relaunching the book, right?
That's correct.
Blue Water, Red Blood, a story about two men, and one of them, Donald Roebling, this unbelievable character, doesn't seem like it could be a real person from what DL has told me, single-handedly went from saving people from a hurricane, that was the intent of this unbelievable invention, to saving people during wartime. Welcome, DL. So glad to have you here. Please tell me about Donald Roebling and Holland Smith and how they changed the Second World War.
Fantastic. I'm so pleased to be here and so pleased to have an opportunity to be able to tell people about some little known facts that were instrumental in saving over 100,000 Marine lives during the World War II. And the two people you're talking about, Don Roebling and Holland Smith, were the people that really fought not only the technological problems, but also fought a lot of problems in the political field because of the red tape that restricted them from going ahead and developing the equipment quicker. So it's a very interesting story. Just a few seconds of introduction to the two characters. Donald Roebling was from one of the wealthiest families in the world in the period of time that he grew up. He was grandson of August Roebling. August Roebling, the name will sound familiar to many of you, and that was because he built the Brooklyn Bridge. And his family owned Roebling Steel and many other businesses, and they were financiers as well. So they were very, very wealthy and influential. Donald was a poor little rich boy. As a child, he was pampered. He had an affinity for sweets that affected his life and eventually ended in contributing to his demise. But at 23, he weighed 450 pounds and was addicted to sweets. For example, one of the servants at the Roebling house did nothing but control his sweets and ice cream supply, and he ate several gallons of ice cream every day. So he was a very unusual character. He was very, very intelligent, but very self-minded. You've heard of marching to a different drummer. I would say that Don Roebling was the different drummer. When it came time to go to college, both his grandfather and father were engineers that had graduated from Rensselaer Polytechnic in Pennsylvania. At that point in time, Don didn't want to do anything that his father and grandfather had done. So he chose to go to Bliss Electrical College and enrolled there. And at the end of one semester, he came home because he'd been kicked out of school. The reason why was that he found fault with many of the doctrine that the professors were teaching and proved them wrong. Of course, John Roebling, who was his father, decided to try to get Bliss to accept him. So what he did was he made an offer to Bliss to pay for their buildings and pay all their expenses for the period of time that Donald would be in school. That is an awfully enticing offer. However, Bliss refused because of the nature of Don's personality. That gives you a pretty good idea about what he did. He started a construction business when he was 21 with the help of his father, and his main activities were tinkering with building and inventing things and collecting stamps and ham radio. So at 22, 23 years old, that was his activities. I think Holland Smith was very famous in World War II. He was the general that was in command of the Marines from the period of time that they started and went across the Central Pacific. In other words, from Tarawa, across the Marshalls, across all the island hopping into Iwo Jima. He was the commanding general and was involved in planning and executing the invasions of all those small islands. And he had started as a graduate of the University of Alabama. An interesting part of his life was that he had been given or been offered a appointment to West Point. However, his parents would not allow him to take it because they were the last of the unreconstructed Confederates, and they didn't want him to go to a school that had been part of the Yankee Army. So he ended up going to college. He found out he hated law, and he joined the Marines as a private. And that's where he started out, and he worked his way up through the ranks, through the Banana Wars. Through World War I, he was on General Pershing's staff, and he was the only Marine officer at that time that ever went to the Army War College. He was that good. And his job on Pershing's staff was to evaluate battle tactics. And he hated frontal assaults. In other words, he hated the type of tactics that most of the European leaders used by just charging out of the trenches and trying to run across no man's land and break through the other lines. He believed that you needed to be mobile and to try to circle around and flank armies rather than do the frontal assaults. And the really ironic part to all of this is that when he was given the responsibility of attacking those small islands in the Pacific, there is no way to do anything other than frontal assaults. A lot of them are only a mile long and a half mile wide, so there's no way, no tactic possible other than frontal assaults. Very interesting.
So now, at this point, how do we get to this device that Roebling created?
Great question, Angelina. In 1928, there was a horrible hurricane that came across Florida, and it approached in a rather unusual angle. It came from the north to the south along the east coast. And Lake Okeechobee is deeper at the north end of the lake and shallower at the south end. So it blew all the water out of Okeechobee and over a narrow portion of the south part of the land surrounding it. And that was Pahokee, Belglade, and South Bay. Those three towns were absolutely decimated. 2,500 people were killed or more. They never have determined what the final total was. And many of them died because they were swept 7 to 10 miles back out into the Everglades by the floodwaters. They were injured. They starved to death. They were died of injuries like broken arms and legs, and some were eaten by wild animals. It was a horrible, horrible thing. John Roebling had property in Lake Placid, and he tried to assist the people, and it took him 3 weeks to get from Lake Placid down to the south end of the lake, which is only about 60 miles. Because of that, he encouraged his son, who was having trouble finding what his lease in life was, to try to invent a vehicle that could go any place and do anything. What happened was, after that water flooded and destroyed those areas, it went back into the lake. The soil in that area is mostly muck, and when it becomes wet, it becomes like soup. So any kind of a wheeled vehicle that went in there sunk down to the axles immediately. Of course, the water went back into the lake, so there was no way to get a boat through or anything. So the people were stranded. And the result was that Donald Roebling invented a tracked vehicle. The tracked vehicle was originally designed to be able to run at about 3 or 4 miles an hour on land and about 2 or 3 miles an hour in the water. And that's what they did in order to be able to save people that had been blown into the swamp. It took him until he started work on it in 1932, and it took 5 years to develop it. But by the time he was finished, he had a vehicle that could go anywhere and do anything. It could climb a 20-degree angle. It could run on road or water. And one of the very unique patented items on it was, in most people, when they thought of moving a vehicle in water, tried to put a propeller on it. But what he did was, he was genius enough to take the tracks and actually make cups on them so that the tracks themselves provided the locomotion in water. He did not have a separate system to be able to worry about guarding from trash or debris in the water. They actually used extended the length of the tracks and made cups, so the cups themselves propelled the machine.
That's interesting because I'm from Massachusetts and they have those duck tours there with the the Second World War boats that look similar to that. Can you kind of talk about the difference? Because when I looked at it, I thought that was the type of vehicle, but it is different.
Very different. The duck is a floating boat. It has large wheels on it, so it is basically propeller driven. And the duck itself then, when it gets to the land, it can run on its big tires. The problem with that is that there is a huge amount of debris. If you can imagine a battlefield in a place that has been shelled for several days, there are craters, there's all kinds of steel around, and tires, no matter how good they are, don't hold up in that kind of a situation. The vehicle itself looks like almost like a tank with the top cut off, and basically that's it. Later in the war, they actually fitted the top with different kinds of guns, even flamethrowers, and they were used to help as assault vehicles as well as landing craft.
And now, how many soldiers did you fit inside those?
Approximately, there were different versions, but the most of the time, the normal complement was 20 soldiers. They could also use it to put a field gun in, like a 75 millimeter or a 35 millimeter anti-tank gun. Those were all could be loaded in the vehicle and then unloaded up on the shore itself.
So there's a lot of history because I know these vehicles were actually produced in Central Florida. That's
correct. A large number of them. They were produced some in other places, but this was the major plant. During the lead up to producing them their German submarines appeared in the Gulf of Mexico and made attempts to get close enough to shell the plant that was producing them in Dunedin, Florida.
Wow.
Now, a lot of people don't realize how much German submarine activity there was, particularly in the early part of the war. But anyway, the Marines or the Naval Department decided to build a naval reserve plant and get it away from there so they didn't have to worry about that. And a site in Lakeland, Florida was selected. It is still in existence today. If you're on US 92 and you're traveling from Auburndale towards Lakeland, it is on the south side of the road there, across from the Larson Power Plant. It's now called JBT Technologies. But many of the vehicles were built there, and the vehicles that landed on places like Tarawa and Iwo Jima and Okinawa, those came from that Lakeland plant.
So, can you just touch on Roeblings' invention and how it got into a magazine?
Oh yes, that's another interesting story, and it shows how history is often affected by chance. Roebling had developed this vehicle, which lost a lot of its relevance because of what happened around Lake Okeechobee. Hoover decided to build a dike around it, and so there was less need for it around Lake Okeechobee. However, in 1937, in October of 1937, Life magazine ran an article about this magnificent vehicle that could go on land and water and could save people, and it could do go just about anywhere. And later in that year, an event happened in China.
What happened in China?
There was a event called the Rape of Nanking, and I won't go into all the horrible details,